Welcome to the second episode of Shadowy Spectrums. I am your host, Peter Shelley. The focus of this show will be UFOs and other fantastic mysteries. Tonight, it is my special honor to interview Luis R. González, a Spanish UFO researcher and author. First, I want to express a special thanks to Klaus Schwan of Sweden for suggesting Luis as a guest and for making this interview possible. Good evening, Luis. How are you?
Good evening, Peter. I am fine, thanks. I live here in Malaga, in the south of Spain. It's a lot of hot. It's a hot day.
Welcome to the show.
Okay.
And thank you for being here. Please give us some information on your background.
Okay, my interest in ufology began in the mid-70s. I just investigated a couple of UFOs cases in my own town, but really I am an armchair ufologist. I usually dissect others' work and investigations. I never really was very attracted by the simpler extraterrestrial hypothesis. At the beginning, I was following Jacques Vallée's ideas about a more subtle extraterrestrial contact. But now I have evolved into a completely skeptic. Nevertheless, I continue to be fascinated by how people believe in weird things and how they can delude themselves and others. Nowadays, my interest in UFOs are centered in abductions. I wrote about a book about abductions. I have a couple of catalogs on abductions and close encounters. But I am now reading many comics and having a look at the aliens as fiction in comics, in novels, in films, etc., and movies. This is my at present.
Interesting. And then what is your profession now?
Oh, I am a master in business administration. I have my own firm of building houses and offices, but now I am retired.
So you were in the construction business?
Yes.
Excellent. And Spanish ufology is something virtually unknown in most English-speaking countries, especially the USA, unfortunately. Yeah. Please introduce us to the subject.
Okay. I will. The Spanish ufology just began in 1950, really, because, well, not a little bit later, because that was the time of the first wave, but the first wave was not. There was no any UFO group following it, so nobody knew about that until later, when in the end of the 50s or the beginning of the 60s, Antonio Rivera created with some other people the Centro de Estudios Interplanetarios, CEI, in Barcelona, and he was the first who began looking in all newspapers and discovered that first wave in 1950. Then it began to appear some other groups that went along another magazine called Algo. Well, first of all, I forgot to excuse my rusty English because I am not bad used to speak in English. Sorry, please excuse me. Then when the second wave, UFO wave, took place in 1968-69, there were many local groups who began to investigate these cases and join together and make a publication, the main publication was extended by the Estudios Interplanetarios. And then after that, there was some interest in UFOs, but the next wave really was in 1974, 75, or even 76. And this was when all the people really got interested in themes, and the ufology in Spain split it into groups.
So basically there were three primary waves: 1950,
exactly.
1968 to 69, and 1974 to 76.
Okay.
And then what were some of the most important cases?
Well, let me begin at the beginning. Okay. At first, in the 50s, the used flying saucer craze got no much notice in the Spanish press. There was some bullets but no really local cases. Nevertheless, it is important to remind your followers that at the time, the main media was not newspapers, but the radio. The TV did not start in Spain until 1956 or 57. So the problem is that there are no radio recordings that have survived. So we don't know how it moves in the radio. We only have the newspapers to guide that. Then, by chance, the very first information about Major Kehoe proposal about the flying saucers being extraterrestrials appears in Spain on December 28th, 1949. But that is Spanish Fool's Day. So maybe nobody took him very much, don't believe him. Nevertheless, soon there began to flow news about saucer sightings in other countries, coming closer and closer. And finally, on the 21st of March, saucers began to be seen over all Spain, first by normal people, later by the so-called qualified witnesses, like pilots, soldiers, etc. Usually there were brief and faraway sightings on something silver, leaving a trail. The modern ufologists believe that there were just American jets making an unauthorized mapping of our country. The papers soon were full of graphic jokes, and people were using saucers to advertise their products, like in any other country. Even the main comic book of the time, one called High Mito, devoted a special issue to the theme, mixing flying tableware thrown by angry waves with Martian visitors. There was even one of the very first UFO photos appearing in a local newspaper in the Mallorca, Iceland, in April. Not to be outdone, the newspapers from the nearby island of Ibiza published a photo of a landed saucer and his occupants. They confessed the hoax at the end of the article. The first photo was also hoax, but some people still think it to be genuine. If you want, we can go to the first occupant case in Spain.
Okay, but before we do, you made the comment that you're interested in old cases, not recent ones. And perfect, we will focus only on the classic cases. Of course, that makes for the question, why did you stop following the Spanish UFO scene about 2000? Why was that?
The answer is clear. With the marketing of the phenomena after the 50th anniversary in 1997 and the arrival of internet, when everything goes directly from the people without any filters. So I was overloaded with rubbish because 99% of it is rubbish. So I decided it was much better to concentrate in the origin of the phenomena and the feedback it received from fiction and comics. As I wrote once, everything, all the features in abductions, for example, from the smallest detail to the main bright ideas, have been predicted in early fictions. And I think also important to identify and locate the earliest and more close version of any UFO story or investigation. So I could eliminate or dismiss all those cases that surfaced many years after the facts and were never properly investigated. So that is the reason that is the reason why I keep to the old times.
Okay.
Maybe
Now,
I also.
okay, and then you can correct my pronunciation. We're going to talk primarily about the Villares del Saz. Is that correct?
Villares del Saz.
And 1953 case, the Madrid Contacte San Martin case. In 1954, the Humo affair. From the 60s, Valdi Hijederos.
Let's we enter in the first two cases, and then we will speak about Humo.
Okay. Well, let's.
Villares del Saz in 1953 is a small town. It's really a village, and then there. Past my midday, 14 years old illiterate boy and cowherd called Máximo Muñoz saw a big balloon, he called that way, on the ground behind him. He was taking care of some animals. I don't remember. I think there were sheep, and a faint whistling attracted his attention. Entonces, he looked beside him and saw the UFO. It was shaped like a water hook. It was metallic. But it was small. It was less than 1 meter.
Shaped like a water jug.
Yes, shaped like a water jug. And through an opening in the top came three small beings, about 50, 60 centimeters tall, with yellow faces, narrow eyes, and oriental features. They spoke in a language the boy couldn't understand. They were dressed in blue, had a short flat hat with a visor in front, and they had a metal sheet on their arms. One of them smacked the boy's face, just that, and then re-entered the machine with slowed, making a soft sound, and went off like a rocket. Later, the police found footprints and 4 small holes, 5 centimeters deep, forming a perfect square, 35 centimeters inside. The only investigation really was a few days later by a couple of newspapermen coming from the local newspaper. That is the only investigation known at the time. Then in January 1967, so about 14 years later, the most important ufologist in Spain, Ballester Olmos, visited the place and tried to speak with the witness, but the father didn't allow him. So he insisted that it was true, but didn't allow him to be interviewed. That is the step. Since then, nobody has been able to find the witness again.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yes, there is some other speculations and by other people, but for example, as I told before, in 1970s, ufology in Spain splits into sides, two warring sides. We fight with each other too much, and then the other side consider. Well, in my side, we of course consider ourselves the best ones, the scientific ones. The other side was the head of the other side was JJ Benitez. Was a newspaper. Being a newspaper and having some money to back him, he was able to go everywhere to interview anybody who wanted to be interviewed and to speak about anything, but always from a very credulous point of view. So you may find more information about these cases, but they came all from modern mysteriologists, I call them, that they don't like to investigate. They have only to push their own agenda and never share material, and they will not accept to exchange information with us, and they always keep the mystery. They don't try to explain it away. It is important always to keep it the mystery. Even the most unexplained case, once and again, they will always find some hint to keep the mystery.
Well, let's go to the next case. Tell us about the Madrid contactee San Martin case.
Alberto San Martin, yes. This was... you have to take into account that it took place on November 1954. It appeared in the
17th of November.
Yes, November. Yeah, correct. Exactly, and it took place in the middle of Madrid, in the capital of the country. So it is quite surprising. So the only excuse that nobody saw anything, nobody else saw anything, because it was after midnight. But even after midnight in Madrid, there is people everywhere. Then, as Mr. Alberto San Martin told his story, he was walking home through the city streets. It was a male news when they felt an irresistible impulse to go to a nearby bridge. There are some bridges, road bridges, not with a river below them, just road bridges. And then when he was there, he encountered a beautiful man with a shoulder-length hair, wearing a dark-colored toga. This man smiled at him, tapping him on the shoulder, and went back to the beach briefly, returning with a small, rectangular, pink-purple stone, bearing a mysterious inscription. He gave to the witness. Then he returned to the bridge, and the witness could see a luminous disc emerging and flying away. It's a good thing. So this story was appeared almost 3 months later in a local newspaper, and then one of the very first Spanish ufologists, Father Severino Machado, analyzed the stone and concluded that it was a message from Saturn. And this is completely absurd. It makes no sense. It's really, I am sure that the story is just an obvious hoax. Do you can really believe that an alien will come here and only give you a stone with some strange marks inside?
Does the stone still exist?
Well, I don't. I really don't know. I think the stone was examined by several mineralogists and was considered a normal rock from somewhere. But the San Martin, I think it took it with him because he went to Brazil, and there in Brazil he wrote a book about his story, and maybe you can find it somewhere in some archives. I don't know really. I think it never returned here to Spain.
So now we that's interesting. Now we come to the 1960s and the so-called Umo affair.
Yeah.
And to quote my guest, the most important contribution of Spain to UFO folklore has been around for more than 50 years.
Well, now 60 or 70.
60 or 70 years, and it is still quite controversial.
Yes.
In spite of scores of umologists that painstakingly comb the sacred texts in search of definitive proof of their extraterrestrial origin. There is no doubt among the serious Spanish ufologists that Umo is a hoax.
Yeah.
Okay, Luis, give us the in-depth story of the Umo affair.
Yes.
Now, Umo is a story that perhaps has been over-discussed in Spain and Spanish circles, but again, little known to English-speaking audiences. This story is complicated and convoluted.
Yes. Well, let me begin at another beginning. You see, in 1958, one American author called Donald Franson, wrote a short science fiction story and named it The Time for Delusion. It was about a debunker who, in order to make a fool of every cultist once and for all, decided to publish, under a pen name, his own hoax, a book describing several phone talks with a Venusian. Among all the nuisance, he planted many hidden clues, providing his fallacies. The book became an unexpected bestseller, and when he disclosed his authorship to blow up the affair, pointing out to the buried evidence and self-revealing inconsistencies, and nobody believed. They all knew he had been ordered to recant. Well, sometimes nature repeats fiction, and this is really what happens with the Umo affair.
So wait a minute, let me make this clear. There was in 1958, there was a fictional story about a human receiving phone calls from Venus. Is that what you're saying?
No. It was a fictional story about a debunker writing a novel saying that he was receiving phone calls from Venus.
Okay.
The debunker, the story says that when the debunker confesses the hoax, nobody believes him.
Interesting.
But it was just a story. It was a science fiction story. But yes, here, 10 years later, it happens in reality here in Spain. Just the same.
So you have a different opinion about the story being complicated and convoluted. You say not so.
No, it's not so. It's not so.
But it has been sold as such.
It has been sold as such. But in a nutshell, and with the insight provided by a present perspective from the 21st century, the Umo affair is just a joke who came out of cosmic proportions. Who can believe really? Some who have a minimum of scientific knowledge can believe in aliens evolved in a faraway star so completely human that they can move among us without arousing suspicions. They are completely human. Well, there is a small difference. They took special care to point to this difference, but we can go into that. So we have aliens who can cross interstellar distances in a few days, but need to rent a mediocre Spain typist. He's mediocre because he couldn't even kept proper margins.
And made many mistakes too.
Yes. Because they have too much sensitive fingers to use a typewriter. Since from now we have buy order printers, for instance, and you can speak and the computer write for you. So it is not necessary to find a typewriter, a typist. Or you have the documents are illustrated with colored crayons. So it's completely so ridiculous. I can't believe it. How can anybody think it is true?
So, in other words, for people who are just hearing the UMO case for the first time, this is where human people on the Earth are receiving letters supposedly sent by extraterrestrials.
Yes, exactly.
And then you have some comment about the emblems, the UMO emblem. And,
yes, because not forget that to identify to authenticate their documents, supposedly they use they ink one of those sensitive fingers with a different color for each country, and then leave a pressure mark of it in every origin, in order not to be for the receivers not to get another papers from another people making a joke. So it's an amazing story, really, because those unilateral contacts between purported expeditionary groups of aliens, with some Spaniards during the Franco regimes, it began really with a self-professed professor. He was Fernando Sesma, just a civil servant.
Fernando Sesma,
a civil servant working in the Madrid telegraph office. He had a peculiar liking for cryptography, for graphology, and he was one of the very first to write in the press about the George Adamski, the American contactee. He published just one of his articles just before San Martin got his stone. Thanks to the publicity he obtained with those articles, he created his own group called Sociedad de Amigos de los Visitantes del Espacio, Friends of Space Visitors. And during the following years, they will discuss at length about that space stone and his meaning. Then, in 1961, was when Sesma saw his first UFO and began to receive anonymous letters. They were absolutely symbolic, full of incoherent sentences, very poetic, and then the first author was one who identified himself as an alien called Saliano from the planet Auco, orbiting Alpha Centauri. Then the meetings of the group took place in the basement of a bar called the Joyful Whale and became a fashionable meeting point for all the peculiar characters in Madrid. So the temptation was unsurmountable.
So does this bar still exist?
Sorry. Yes, it exists. It is the pub is now an Irish pub, and but if you ask the owner, you can go down and visit the basement.
Ah. Okay, and then in January 1966, something happened.
Yes, Sesma received some phone calls, followed by an emissary that showed him surprising three-dimensional cars. At the time, you have to consider that he was living in Spain in a Franco regime, very isolated. So, in reality, those cars were like some Japanese one now that you can get there at the time in Japan. Even Selma himself recognized them later. So after showing that to him, he began to receive tens of pages describing the human planet, their civilization, etc. Each and every one of them was read aloud by Sesma to his group, along with message of Saliano and other experiences, mixing everything like raw material for a continuous brainstorming. But the humor papers did not look like any another piece of moonshine. It was a very skilled work. There was very non-proselytizing, non-messianic, and strong rational philosophy. And besides, to keep all the authors insisted in not to be believed. How that was the main help, not to be believed. If you want, I can read you the first paragraph of the first humor document.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Well, let begin. I will. It's my own translation, and it is very difficult to show the strange Spanish usage they use. But well, I will try. We wish to inform planet Earth of our origin and provenance, and ends that have moved us to visit you. We come from Humo, a planet that revolves about the star Yuma, registered in your Earth under the name Wolf 424. We received instructions in 12 January 1965, Health Christian era, regarding the orientation and limits of this report. Drafting approved. We tried to adapt, except unsurmountable transcription barriers. We use Spanish language. The difficulties of translating and expressing concepts in terrestrial languages are immense. We don't hide that after verifying the surprisingly similarity between the biological structures of our two planets, we were dismayed to realize that to our respective means of social communication differs to a large degree. I think he continues giving all the details about the planet size, the number of stars, etc., etc.
Well, thank you for reading that. Now, in the chronological sequence, the letters were first, or the phone calls were first?
Well, one phone call was first. Then came the postcard, the three-dimensional postcards, and that the envoy took with himself. So Sesma couldn't keep them. And then began the documents.
Can you tell us about the first telephone call? I guess that was on Friday, January 14th, 1966, the first phone call?
I don't know if that exactly, because the problem is that at the time in Spain it's quite difficult to record the phone cards. So there is only one phone call ever recorded, and shows a very strange word, like because there is something for that. The human men say they normally use telepathy, Only among them. They
Telepathy.
can use yes,
Telepathy.
telepathy.
Mm-hmm.
They can use them on humans, so they can speak with us through telepathy. Only among them, but they have the vocal cords atrophied, so they couldn't speak really. So the voice we heard is quite mechanic and quite short sentences. It is quite probably that it was some kind of gadget to keep the voice distorted.
So it was like an artificial larynx.
Yes.
And with a robotic character
Yes,
to the voice.
Yes, exactly.
And then I guess the first phone call was from an entity called DEI 98. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The human man, well, woman. It is interesting because they are governed by a woman usually, and then the DEA 98 they use short the short letters and a number usually to identify themselves. And that is quite a science fictional topic.
Now and then there's information that a professor in the medicine department at the University of Madrid received a phone call.
This is one of the many anonymous, never ever found people who say you have received something from Humo. Nobody have ever talked to him. Nobody have ever find him. And of course, anything that he describes have never been seen. So there is no artifact known human artifact known.
Yeah, because supposedly the story is that a package arrived for him, and then what was in the package supposedly? Some
kind of biological film that explain details about the biological experiment or something like that.
There was supposedly a cube that gave a presentation.
Yes,
that was voice activated. But these artifacts don't exist, or nobody knows what.
Has seen them. Nobody, absolutely nobody.
Yeah, so there was like a cube that. You read some Humo words and it activates and shows like a video history of the planet Humo, something like that, right?
Yes, something like that, yes.
And so now you...
yes, if you want, I can give you some more details about the documents.
Sure, please.
Yeah, yes. For example, to continue with the beginning, at the same time they insisted, do not believe us. A masterful psychological strike came from the sky on February the 6th, 1966 at 8 in the night. A UFO flew over an astonished witness who was driving home. It was Mr. Jordán Peña, and landed for a few seconds in the outskirts of Madrid, even some physical traces. And then to establish a link between these both sets of events, we have the beautiful idea that the UFO displayed upon his belly the same emblem used to authentify the Humo papers. It much resembles an H. How could you call it? The alchemical symbol of Uranus.
Mm-hmm.
So, with the passage of time, Mr. Jordán Peña reached the uncomfortable status of being the only credible and identified witness of a close encounter with a human spaceship. There were some comments about additional ones, but nobody ever found him. So it is curious to discover that he does believe that the UFO he saw was really extraterrestrials. He has always maintained that it was some kind of experimental aircraft developed by the Americans and deployed in Spain thanks to the collaboration with the Franco regime. To him, the human affair will be some kind of sociological experiment masterminded by the CIA. CIA, yeah.
And then
unexpectedly, this witness joined Sesma's group at first without revealing that he was the witness of that Aluche case. It is called Aluche by this place where it landed. And soon he was reached to be a very good friend of Mr. Sesma. Then it began to arrive more and more documents. The flow of documents was continuous.
How many letters are there approximately?
Let me see. I think at the end, 1 second. I have some data at the end.
Didn't you tell me about 500 or something like that?
A little bit more. Let me 1 second, please. Yeah, here. Well, now the duration of the voice was a little bit more than the 1 year, from February 1966 to July 67, plus another outburst at the beginning of 69. From then onwards, there have never more than some occasional contacts. The space had been limited to Spain, mainly, despite the hidden of some documents suggesting translation to languages as non-existent as Slav Czech. There has been a very many followers in France. These documents have arrived much later in the 80s, when the old story was revealed by Antonio Rivera.
Now, you said there was a batch of documents about spiritism and parapsychology.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
Well, just 1 second. You're asking me about how more pages were. There were known about 1,000 known pages, corresponding to 100 and a half different shipments. A third of them, more or less, are just pure gossip, comments on each other's and on the people of the group, etc. About 300 pages refer to various philosophical considerations. Around less than 200 pages gave some raw data, usually impossible to verify, and only 100 and a half, more or less, contain valuable information that you can comment if you want, if you wish. But they were really nothing novel, because, for example, the cosmological ideas theories could be derived from the work of the Englishman Eddington, and many. I could verify that they were copying copy and paste, as we say today, from books by Martin Gardner, The Ambidextrous Universe, or even by Isaac Asimov, The Noble Cases. So it is not really nothing mysterious at all about those documents. The one I more like are the most fascinating are the one about the spiritism and parapsychology,
Uh-huh.
because they don't, as I told you, they use telepathy, but only that. They don't believe in any other paranormal power. So, in his document, in one of his documents, describes a supposed human expedition to India to investigate, with her advanced technology, the markings of the fakirs. Naturally, they discover our axis and disclose to the readers the tricks employed. But it's very funny to read and see the illustration used in their explanation for the famous climbing rope trick. That is a very famous story. It has even appeared in the Nature newspaper, and it is not real. It is not real. It was just a fiction. But they proposed a completely unworkable explanation using some kind of metal rods covered with like a rope. But this was completely absurd. In short, it was a strong skeptical commentary for born telepaths. So you can imagine how strange is that mumbo jumbo, that pseudo-scientific mumbo jumbo, is mixing things, all kind of things.
Now, in 1973, the Umaite letters predicted a cataclysm.
Yes.
And
yes,
what happened with that?
They allegedly have a secret bunker in the mountains at the outside of Madrid, and they could say that it was just when the famous Jewish Arab Jewish 6 days war, the beginning of the 6-day war in Israel, between Israel and the Arabs. And so they fear it was going to be an atomic war. So they will fly away and return to their planet. But to her followers, they could use that bunker, but only I think 75 people. So they have to select the people who can go there. Some people, you can go there with all your family. You have to select people. It was very, very stressing, and it was completely useless because evidently no nuclear war arrived, and there was no need to use a complex code to decode where the bunker was.
And the Umites never explained what happened because there was no atomic war, and they didn't explain their mistake?
No. They have flown away. They haven't anything to explain. They couldn't explain anything. They was just fear. It was just fear, like anybody else in our planet almost, that were convinced that if the Israel and the Arabs will the war was longer, the Americans will intervene and will be an atomic war.
Now,
everybody thought that at the time. It was quite expected.
Well, and then Jordan Pina supposedly was able to manipulate people with the Umaite letters. Could you tell us about the example of the businessman Juan Dominguez? What happened with him?
Well, Juan Dominguez was an inventor. He had several inventions, and he was convinced that the UMO were going to help him to develop color television at the time. Consider it was 1965. And he wrote a book defining all the theories of the cosmological theories. And then later, when Jordan Peña confessed the hoax, he decided to destroy all the copies. I fortunately I got a couple of them and have it in my library, but he decided to destroy. Yes, I was going a little bit quick because we have to talk about Jordán Peña and how he confessed it.
Exactly. Yeah. Tell us about the Jordán Peña and the confession.
Well, since the very beginning, there is another incident that we have to comment a little. In 1967, the SESMA received a letter saying that the UMO airships were going to land in Earth, one in Madrid, one in Colombia, and one in some other place, I don't remember now. So they quickly went, but the announce came too quickly, and it was the following day. So everybody went out looking at the sky, looking for the spaceship, but nobody saw them, fortunately. But then suddenly, 2 days later, I think they find a photo of the UMO spaceship in the main newspaper of Madrid. Allegedly, one photographer was taking photos in a park, saw the spaceship going above him, and took a collection of photographs. Later, Antonio Rivera, the followers I mentioned at the beginning, investigated the case and wrote a book that called The Perfect Case, Un Caso Perfecto, and explained that there were 2 photographs, no one, 2. They were almost the same place, but curiously, no people appearing in their photos. Was almost since the beginning that photos were considered hoax. One meteorologist examined them and saw and think that the clouds you could see were not moving properly, and it was then later, a few years later, an American group examined it with a computer and allegedly found a small thread used to drop a small model. This explanation has been debated, has been negated by JJ Benitez and company, but we have the confession not only of Jordán Peña, but also of his accomplices, the people who helped him. So we are sure that it was a fake, it was a hoax.
Now, let me ask you, I put a question to an UMO group on Facebook,
okay,
and I asked them, knowing the confessions of Jordán Peña, what are good reasons to still not accept his confession? I wanted them to explain that, and their general collective response was that Peña, in their opinion, didn't have the capacity, skills, and knowledge to write the letters. But I asked, wasn't Jordán Peña a teacher of math and physics, and a senior telecommunications technician? Wouldn't that have given him a degree of skill and knowledge? Plus, he had access to textbooks, articles, and he had a extravagant imagination.
Yes.
What do you think? Did he have the capacity to write something like that?
Yes, of course. There is no doubt about that. The material is not so advanced. To me, they are like those Rothschild images that you project what you think on them, and they answer you what you already know. So this is the problem with some people like the French Jean-Pierre Petit, who is an astrophysics that believe that the UMO is true. The UMO cosmology is true, but it really was already commented at the time by the Russian, by that people I mentioned Eddington. So there is really nothing advanced in that. And then the things that are advanced are completely ridiculous. For example, his idea of evolution, because instead of evolution, as is the normal in all those people who believe in mysteries, don't believe in evolution. I don't know why, but then they usually don't believe in evolution. So they commented that the evolution is not true, and all the infinite possible shapes of any animal are kept in 32 krypton molecules in the brain of each animal. It's completely absurd.
And then now the UMO group responded to my questions saying that Pena retracted his confession. What can you say about that?
Well, that is true. That is true. He retracted the confession, but he confessed it again and again, and to everybody who went to his house, make a slightly different confession, but never give any evidence of what he said. That he said he had kept, but nobody has ever seen. I think he enjoyed too much his own role, because and I understand him, because I myself has become a humor hoaxer. If you want, I can tell you the story.
Sure.
Yes.
So you were a homo hoaxer yourself?
Yes, in part.
But in the current times, not in the 1960s.
No. It was about 5 years ago. I wrote a novel about all the story of the Peña and humor and everything, a science fiction story, based in real facts, as they say, and to market it to a few friends. I sent them from London. I sent them a postcard looking like one old humor letter. Everything, the authenticate fingerprint, everything, some humor letters, etc. And it was just a joke to my friends to announce my new book, but one of them was a little bit too much naive and believed it, and then shared it with that French group of humor experts. So they spent 2 months discussing about all the characteristics and everything of that, and it was very, very funny to be there, seeing how they interpret my own errors, my own mistakes, and they could get another interpretation complicated. It was very funny. So I understand why you can enjoy that role in the affair.
So they thought they were authentic.
Sorry?
The French group thought your hoax letters were authentic.
Yes.
But then later you confessed the hoax, right?
Yes. When I followed them, I let them have a rope for 1 month, and then when the book was out, that it is really clear that it was based on the book. I confess it. I told them it was a joke.
That's interesting. That's an interesting story. And then Let me ask you, though, about the book. So you wrote a fiction book about Umo, the Umo case,
Yes.
correct? Now,
Yes.
do you follow the same story, or do you make changes, or what?
Well, it was quite faithful to the story. It was quite faithful to the story, but well, I have to introduce a character that is going. That is, it has the discovered surprise that he was adopted, and and his father was an alien, and this is the beginning of the story.
So that's something you added.
Yes, of course. She has a character to keep the story moving, but the story told is exactly the true story of human.
So, Luis, now I guess we should jump to the year 1974. There were some incidents known collectively as Valdihijaderos 1974.
Well, not exactly that. If you let me explain, the wave started when the first one to be known, the first case to be known. It even opened the nocturnal news in the only Spanish TV channel at the time. Was a Gian UFO that followed Adrian Sanchez on midday, March 19th. Adrian Sanchez was a salesman who was returning home when, as he told the Guardia Civil, the rural police corps afterwards, saw something dropping to earth. Fearing of an aircraft crash, he drove to the point and discovered instead a gigant cigar-shaped UFO. Two smaller UFOs, like flying tops, appeared and followed him, who drove away at top speed for about 15 kilometers. It was a rural road, not to visit, but with some traffic. The officers noticed his fervor, but found nothing in the place, and nobody else saw anything, despite the hour. Up to now, it is still unexplained, really. There have been some rumors, but it is still unexplained. Then, that night took place the photograph case in my own town, in Malaga, where a journalist took several photos of a light in the sky at night. They get the front cover of several newspapers, and it's interesting to me because 16 years later, in 2010, I helped a friend to reinvestigate the case, and he concluded that it was probably the moon saw through some clouds. But at the time, that was not considered. It was some people say it could be a balloon, but it was very much discussed, and nobody reached any conclusion. So after these two incidents came the second encounter with the third kind encounter with humanoids. It was the one by Maximiliano Iglesias.
Well, wait a minute. One moment here. Why don't we start now? There's a sequence of 4 incidents, correct?
No. There were three separate incidents in places quite far away, one from each other. One was in Cádiz, another was in Sevilla, and the one in Valdejaderos, that is in the north of Spain.
Well, can we start with the first one, though, was March 18th, correct? 1974, March 18th?
Yes, that was the one known later. It happened at that time, but it was known later. It was a Cristobal Muñoz in Cádiz. It was driving home after delivering his boss, an important person in the local administration, who has a chauffeur, and he ran into a fog and met a luminous entity. The press only commented about a light seen in the fog, nothing strange. The car being moved by some wine. But through a common friend, the witness refused to speak, to give more details publicly. An ufologist obtained a second story where he also saw a young figure at the side of the road with a bright light showing in the chest. It's not clear if these ufologists learned the story from the witness itself or only through the middleman, who may be joking. So this case is not really investigated, because the witness didn't want to speak again about that. Then came the Adrian Sanchez case I just described it in Sevilla, with that big saucer, big flying saucer. And then on the 21st March, Maximiliano Iglesias saw two Ufos in the ground. That is the main case we can discuss.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then this is a very interesting case because Maximiliano Iglesias took two encounters. The first one was when he was returning home after visiting his girlfriend. Then he was a 20 years old teenager and was driving a truck. And he was making some service carrying building material. And then he was returning home at night, at 2 in the morning, when he noticed a blinding white light in the road. It was a rural road between two small villages in Salamanca. Approaching to within 200 meters, he discovered a 10-12 meters disc in diameter. Describe it as a small, smooth, metallic surface with no seams, no rivets, and spanning the breadth of the pavement. It was even bigger than the road. It was standing on three metal legs, sprouting from a common point, like a tripod. And then the lights and the diesel engine of the truck failed. When it failed, Maximiliano looked at the UFO and discovered two creatures beside the UFO, at the side of the UFO. They were about 2 meters tall, completely human-like. One pointed at him, but do nothing. Just pointed at him, and I stood looking, like talking with the other one for a while, and then returned inside the UFO. They were dressed in shiny overalls. There is an important point here, because even though Maximiliano insisted that they have looked at him both occasions, he was very worried because he was unable to see their faces. Apparently, something were covered by the same material of the rest of the dresses. Maximiliano also was able to identify how they went into or went out of the object. Then continue with the first meeting. The humanoids returned to the UFO. The landed ship took off slowly and joined another one who was hovering nearby. Maxi started his truck without problems and continued his trip. after crossing below the Ufos, he continued his trip with no problems. But about 200 meters afterwards, he decided to stop and have a look. And saw the UFO landing again. So he decided to run away and return home. When he reached home, he met nobody because it was too early morning and went to sleep. At the next day, he returned to the same place with another trip.
This was the same day.
Yes, well, it's not exactly clear if it was the same day in the night or the following day in the night, but there are some doubts here. Some sources say one thing, and other sources say another.
Uh-huh.
I have been unable to be sure.
Okay.
Because I have not my archives at home here now. So the second time, it was a little bit before the midnight. He was returned once again to home when he saw 3 UFOs in the same location, with one sitting in the road as before, and the 2 others landed in the fields alongside. Again, the lights at the engine failed. But this time, 4 beings began to approach his truck. So he panicked and ran away along the road. But he saw they were following him and decided to go cross country, and then hid in a ditch about 2 kilometers away from his truck.
So he jumped in a ditch to escape them.
Yes, to escape their pursuit. Curiously, there was no moon, and the sky was covered with clouds, and there was a light rain. So it's strange how Maxi could see anything there. It was in the country, cross country, without any source of light, but he describes many things. It's strange, at least. The beings searched for a while in complete silence. They make no noise, no shouts, nothing. They didn't find him, so returned to their UFO. Maxi lit a cigarette, calmed down himself, and after about 10 minutes, returned cautiously to his truck. The UFOs were still there, but there was no being seen. But when they go inside the car and try to start the motor again, the noise made the beings appear. But this time, they simply just go down, have a look, and return to his UFO. The UFO took off again, as if allowing him to pass. He now could start the truck, put the lights on, and continue his trip. But once again, when they go after when he passed the UFOs, he drive away about 200 meters and, yielding to curiosity, returned to the site on foot. She claimed to have come to almost 10 meters from them, or even less.
So excuse me. So in other words, he stopped. He continued, then he stopped, and then he walked back to observe the beings.
Exactly. For the second time, like the time before, he passed, stopped the truck, and returned to the site.
Uh-huh.
And this time, he could see how the 4 beings were working on the embankment with a strange tool. 2 of them were using an instrument, one shaped like a T and another like a U, and the other one the 2 others were just looking. It was a typical Spanish team: 2 people working, 2 people looking.
Exactly.
After a couple of minutes, Maxi decided to return to his truck and drive home. And this is all the story he told.
Have you met this witness, Maxi? Did you have contact with him?
Well, as I told you before, I have almost never investigated any case outside my town, and this was quite far away, there will be about 1,000 kilometers from here to Salamanca.
What?
But it is curious because when I was reviewing all the material I have in the case, I noticed that the point where he found twice those UFOs is not in the usual or in the normal, the expected route travel from one point to the other. It is completely outside that. So I don't know why nobody noticed that before.
And in this area, is there anything significant in this area?
No. It's just mountains and a rural country. Nothing significant to put up. So there is only two conclusions of everything's happened like Maximilian said, or he was invented, or he invented all the stories. I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, it's a very interesting collection of incidents. Sounds like it could be an episode of The Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits. It's very scary, the whole experience that these people had.
He was not really too much afraid because on both nights, when he passed the UFOs, he stopped the car and returned to have a look. So not too really much afraid, I think. That is a little bit strange, but on the other hand, could be completely normal, just curiosity, you know?
Did the witnesses know each other in these incidents?
No. As I told you before, they are very far away one from the others.
So it would be incredible if it was a hoax, right?
No, well, as I told you, the first one, the high-end UFO sent in Sevilla is still unidentified. The other one seen in the fog could be anything. The fog is distorting and could be anything. And it was really not investigated because the witness didn't want to speak. And the Valdejadero's case is quite strange because if it was only one incident, it could be believable. I could admit this. But 2 days, two incidents in the following days, is very strange. It's really very strange. But the witness still say it's true. I will not,
well, originally, originally I wanted to talk about the November 12th, 1976 Talavera case.
But the case in the archive in the base.
But you prefer to speak about some other cases, so why don't you tell us about that?
Yes, because nobody really knows what happened there in Talavera. It was just an apparition, a luminous apparition. It could be described like a cosmonaut, but it could be anything. So there is no real any UFO connection there.
Okay, well then let's go to the other cases.
The history is that they used their arms and all the ballots allegedly were not found any ballot afterwards. But I don't think there is any real relationship with UFOs really. So if you want to speak about UFOs, I prefer to comment two different ones.
Okay.
That are funny because they suggest a direct influence of the famous Star Wars movie.
Yes, please tell us about those.
Episode 4, the first one. Because the first one is known only from a press cutting. So nobody seems to have investigated it, maybe because it was quite straightforward. It was a couple of children, the names were never revealed, who had seen on July 11th, 1978, let's say about 6 months after, no, well, less than that, 3 months after the film was shown on Spanish theaters. And he said that they have seen an X-shaped UFO hovering in the air, and besides it, there were two beings. One looked like a robot, and the second was more than 2 meters tall. He was wearing a white robe with a star and had a human face. In a different context, it would be considered a Blessed Virgin Mary vision that are usually in the Catholic countries like Spain, but here got into the ufological canon. But the sighting was very brief and frightened. The children fled away. But they look clearly like two characters from the Star Wars film.
Uh-huh.
The other case, on the contrary, has passed all the filters. It was investigated at the time by one of the most serious ufologists in our country, Vicente Juan Ballester Olmos, and his team. And I myself had the opportunity, 25 years later, to accompany him and speak to the only witness again, who reaffirmed everything he has always said without going into contradictions or changing or adding or addiction. He has always said the same.
Uh-huh.
The story is the following. In the morning of the July 25, 1979, this farmer was driving to his vineyard when he found a strange object in the middle of the dirt road. Thinking it was another car, he came closer and reached about 4 meters from the object and stopped. And then noticed it was something strange. It was not a car. Then suddenly, two small beings, less than 1 meter tall, hurried out from behind a carob tree to their left, entered the object at full speed, and the object rose rapidly in a few seconds. So it could be like hundreds of similar but never identical incidents. However, the distinctive and the unique feature never before or after similar beings have been reported, because the description of the beings and their clothing is the following. They were dressed in a bright white overall in color. It was very white, like puffed up, and covered them completely, like munkasuks. It's like monks. They wore on their faces what the witness described as those glazes that are used for welding, but longer. Ever since I learned the details of the cases, I was puzzled by the resemblance between the beings described and two characters from the Star Wars movie. They look like a combination of the Jawas and the Tuscans. So that is strange. But has always maintained that he never saw the movie. He never saw the movie, and I believe him.
Did the beings communicate with him?
No. They just run away quickly. In a few seconds, they entered the UFO. The witness was unable to see how they entered the UFO, and the UFO took off and fly away.
So what do you think really happened?
I really don't know. But the thing surprised me is why some real aliens would disguise themselves as characters of the Star Wars film. So it's so ridiculous that I don't know what would have happened. But the witness is truthful. He told what he believes is true.
And what was the opinion of Vicente Juan Ballester Olmos?
The sentence he came, the incident is true, but he can't explain it. He can explain it, but he also admits that it's very difficult to consider it an extraterrestrial beings coming to Earth, doing nothing, going away, and disguising themselves as such. And the main important point is that nobody before or after has described beings similar.
Okay, well, let's go.
If we have time, we can go to discuss abductions. I wrote my only book, my only ufological book was on abductions.
Please, yes, you wanted to talk about 4 cases, so please continue. Yes. Abductions.
Yeah. Well, the first abduction ever known in Spain took place on 9 June 1975 in La Tejita Beach in Tenerife, in the Canary Islands.
Now, stop for a moment. Some people may not know where this is located. Could you explain the location of the Canary Islands?
The Canary Islands are in the middle of the Atlantic, more or less, near Africa.
Owned by Spain.
Yes, there are owned by Spain. Yes.
Okay, so please continue.
Yeah. It is important to notice that one year before, the Peruvian IPRI, Instituto Peruano de Relaciones Interplanetarias, of Interplanetary Relationships, got the World Airlines proclaiming that they had contacted with aliens from Ganymede, the Jupiter satellite.
Uh-huh.
Then JJ Benitez, a Spanish journalist, was the first who visited them, and his chronicles from Peru launched, to the horror of serious ufologists like myself, a huge wave of copycats growing like mushrooms over Spain and South America, the famous Mission Rama. In Tenerife, one group founded along those lines began to contact aliens using Ouija boards and automatic writing. But they added a technological side and employed cameras, citizen band communicators, etc. In May 75, they obtained the first positive results. It may be because of that technological contacts, that technological bias. Their content were none other than with Open 35, an Uranus GN computer.
Let me just add here to make it clear to people. So this was a group in the Canary Islands. They were playing with Ouija boards, or in English you say Ouija boards, and they had contact with the extraterrestrials. Supposedly, there was a supercomputer on the planet Uranus, Open 35. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that is correct.
And they communicated this way with the Ouija or Ouija board, and arranged meetings and so forth with that communication.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not exactly with the Uranus, because they were going to rendezvous with Saturnians aliens. But the computer prevented that meeting with an energy bell, because, as she explained, the Saturnians were like mad scientists pretending to experiment with humans. So they was trying to help them. Anyway, a few sessions later, the computer arranged a new meeting, the same place, just for 2 hours later. So 3 members of the group went there, all armed with photo cameras and film normal and infrared, and went to that isolated beach, the island, and noticed some lights hovering over the sea. Then they apparently experienced some kind of missing time, about 90 minutes. They just have forgotten to take any photos. So they returned, and when they contacted again with the computer, the computer explained to them that yes, they had been on board the ship about 35 minutes in order to make certain tests and to stimulate certain brain centers that would slowly wake up. Then they began to make some hypnosis sessions the following days, and they discovered it was difficult because the first witness was too terrified to give any useful information, and then he will soon leave the group and went to France and never again speak about the situation. Only later it has presently surfaces again. But the other two people went through several sessions, and remember all the abductions inside. The main witness was Paco Padrón, who will later become a famous contactee in the Icelands, and took a completely different story from the second abductee. Each one took different stories, and the only proof they have was a very unclear photograph, just some light problems in the negative. But even though they mysteriously disappeared before being examined by independent experts. So afterwards, the group disbanded, and the powers, Paco Padrón began to develop psychic powers and become a contactee. That is the first Spanish UFO abduction.
Can you share some details of the abduction that came out of the hypnosis? What did they describe?
The typical stories. He was put on a table. He was put on. They put him a helmet with several cables, but nobody speak to him. And the other one told another story. They told about two tall people with a beautiful face, with long blonde hair and blue eyes, that told that they will meet again soon and something like that, but no examination. There were two different stories.
And what is your opinion of the Canary Islands Tahita case?
I think it is difficult to explain, because I don't think that abductees are liars or are waxing anything. But if you put something under hypnosis, everything can be told, and everything can be imagined. So I don't really think it was a true story, and the idea of a computer talking from Uranus is absolutely absurd. It's unbelievable.
And well, I guess we should go then to the case on in 19. Yeah, the Julio F. case. Julio Fernandez?
Yes. Julio Fernandez, Julio F. was called, just not to be identified. He was a married man and was going hunting.
And excuse me, what was the date of this case?
The date of this case, the case was on February 1978, but it was discovered under hypnosis more or less a year later, on April 79. Yes. Then he he was going hunting with his dog. The shooting season has just started, but he was just in the opposite direction to his usual site. He stopped at the bar, and a usual waiter told him to go to one place to hunt, and where he was there, he doesn't remember anything else. He awoke in his car, parked in the middle of a field, and so he had some cartridge missing and some marks on his dog, but don't remember anything. And then 1 year later, when he went to a conference given by none other than Mr. Jordán Peña, the Humo Oaxer, he told him about the story, and then it was Peña himself who hypnotized the witness and obtained all the information about the allegedly abduction. It was strange. It was inside the UFO for about 3 hours, but the aliens were very different to the popular gray ones. There were two very tall beings.
So they were more like Nordics.
Yes, well, not exactly Nordics, because they have big craniums, and elongated chins that seem to counterbalance the pace of the weight of the brains. And they were too tall, 2 meters tall about, and as usual, they took some blood samples from him and from his dog. They usually they talk some stories. They even he was taken on a flight around Earth and make a shot by telepathy with them. And they discuss it with him, his savage desire to hunt rabbits for a sport, examining his shotgun and his cartridge. And they also discuss it even their political systems. So it's all very, very similar to the human oaks. So it was at the time, even if Antonio Rivera believed it, Ballester almost considered it a hoax. And then sometimes later, Jordán Peña confessed to have make it a hoax. But then again, it was one of his confessions without any kind of proofs, any kind of evidence, just his word.
And then that would have been before his Humo confession then.
No, this was after.
After.
I don't know. Let's have a look. No, it was after he confessed that the hypnosis was a fake. Afterwards, some time after, I don't know exactly the time, he confessed the hoax.
Okay, so let's go to the case of Prospera.
Prospera, yes. The case of Prospera Muñoz is quite interesting. Let me see. It all began in one afternoon in July 1947, just when Kenneth Arnold was flying the first flying saucer in Washington, Tacoma. A 12-year-old girl was staying home alone. Well, as I was saying, it was a 12-year-old girl who was staying home alone one day when through the open window saw a small white Opel-shaped craft going over some vineyards where there was no road. So, moments later, two men approached the house. And this man wore very short and wore white, tight-fitting garments. They asked for a glass of water and asked her some strange questions about the nature of time. This same night, the two little men returned and told the witness, the little girl, to follow them while her family slept. They led her to a round object that was landed among the olive trees. He then apparently went through some kind of medical examination inside the object. During that time, a completely normal-looking woman with long dark hairs was with her, comforting and calming her. The girl, 30 years later, he was in 1979. Prospero Muñoz was married to an ufologist. And after reading one of Rivera's book on Ufos, he recounted his own abduction that has happened 30 years before. He suspected that was somehow implanted and was later under hypnosis regressed. And explained it all what I have told before. One of our ufologists, most serious ufologists, Jose Ruesga, has followed the case for many years, and he concluded that it was all a sort of imaginary scapegoat due to problems in the family. The witness doesn't agree. He is even a few weeks ago he gave a conference speaking about his story and new complications and new things happen.
And the Prospero is still alive, correct?
Yes.
And then you have some other material in Spanish below that. What is that?
Yes. The final abduction I want to discuss would have taken place on March 8, 1982. Yolanda was a young woman, was abducted from a skyscraper, a big building, and flew up to a UFO through a beam. And then once inside, he met a small robot.
She met a robot?
Yes, a robot, but with a big head that put her inside a liquid, like a swimming pool, and then he make her some intelligence test, including questions about ecology, etc. That she fails. At the end, everything is a dream, and the story appeared in a comic, in Super Mortadelo, a comic here in Spain. But the funny thing is that about 10 years later, in 1992, the world was informed of the famous Linda Napolitano abduction in Manhattan, that he was abducted by Grace and was supposedly witnessed by the General Secretary of the United Nations at the time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You will have probably heard about that case.
Of course. And you think there is a connection between the comic and the Manhattan case?
Of course, Linda have never read a Spanish comic. Of course not. But as I always say, what one people can imagine, another people can imagine in a different circumstances.
Yes, that's a very strange coincidence. So similar. Well, we have a few more minutes left, so I wanted to, if I could, talk about a case or a couple of cases I came across that I thought were interesting because they involved highly credible, what I would imagine to be highly credible airline pilots.
Not exactly the same. Exactly.
These
The problem with pilots is that they are used to see another flying objects, but terrestrial flying objects. So it has been proved once and again and again and again that they can easily confuse Venus with a UFO.
Well, this case was in the day.
Yes,
the first one. Well, let me just read it to you because I thought it was kind of interesting. Let me add it. We have the time. So this was the Aviaco Flight 501, and the date was January 31st, 1979, and they were going from Valencia to Santander.
Yeah.
And the flight entered a lenticular cloud that was very bright and thick. As soon as they pierced the cloud, and this is during the day, the navigation instruments went berserk.
Yeah.
As everything failed. The compasses began to spin like crazy, some to the right, others to the left.
Yeah.
The artificial horizons, which are always enslaved to the axis of the plane, were out of their mind. Well, one appeared inverted, as if the plane were flying upside down. The other marked as if we were turning 90 degrees to the right, then moved to the left.
Yeah.
The DME, or what is a distance guide, began to count the miles we were traveling. It started counting in Bilboa. It reached mile number 22. We entered the cloud, and it stopped and started counting backwards, as if the plane had turned around. It hit zero, continued to minus 9 miles. This could not be because our course was west, which was known because of the water compass. It was the only one that still worked. This condition lasted 7 minutes. Upon leaving the cloud, everything returned to normal. So all of the instruments failed during their presence in the cloud. The radar also failed. They were not able to communicate. They could neither send nor receive. The plane entered the cloud at 4:45 p.m. On leaving the cloud, the instruments returned to normal. The odometer jumped to mile number 22. The radar came on immediately, which was weird because normally it needed a few minutes to warm up. Before taking off, the pilots had carried out a system check and everything was fine. After leaving the cloud, the airplane clocks marked an excessive time for a flight that should have taken only 15 minutes. Fuel consumption was correct for 32 minutes of flight. The plane remained for 17 minutes more than logically it should have taken to reach Santander. There's some other details, but do you have any comment about this case?
Well, I really don't know about the case because I am not interested in this kind of cases. But I have asked some friends, and we have to take into account several things. First, the aircraft went into a cloud, and he went outside the cloud. He had some problems there, and then went outside the cloud and was some 10 or 20 minutes later than usual. Okay. But he appeared in above the sea. They have the fuel consumption is right with the more distance, the more minutes. So it was not frozen in mid-flight, and I don't find anything that suggests a UFO there. Where is the UFO? Not the cloud.
Well, the thing that I thought was interesting was that these pilots appeared in airline uniform, which is unusual. on the Spanish TV show, which I love, this old classic TV show, Mas Ala, hosted by Dr. Jimenez de la Oso. Yeah, I love the episodes of this show. Very interesting. Yeah. And, well, let me just add, though, that there was a sequel. On March 11th, 1979, there was a second encounter, and the same pilots were involved. At around 5:10 p.m. Sunday, Carlos Garcia Bermudez and Antonio Perez Fernandez were piloting an Aviaco DC-9. It was Flight 174. They had taken off from Bilbao and were heading to Barcelona. 25 miles east of Pamplona, they saw a dark mass. As they got closer, the dark became a lighter lead color. Radar picked up nothing. So was it a cloud? According to the pilots, absolutely not. It was symmetrical. The edges were absolutely defined. The shapes were perfect. Seen from above, it looked like a mushroom, but 3 overlapping plates or discs. Any cloud, however geometric, has deformations, tatters, fraying. This object appeared solid and static in the airway. If it moved, it did so very slowly. The shadow cast on the land was a perfect oval. The dimensions were unbelievable. It took 7 seconds to cross it at the center. The DC-9 was flying at 7 miles per minute, making the thing at least 3 kilometers in diameter.
Excuse me, but it's not clear. He went through the cloud?
No, in the second encounter, they did not go through the cloud.
Under the cloud, okay.
Well, no, actually around the cloud. They didn't. Now, these pilots, this time, they did not inform Madrid because of what happened in the previous flight. But another Aviaco DC-9 taking off from Pamplona Airport called Madrid. Madrid, hey Madrid, do you have any radar contact with a unidentified object about 25 miles east of Pamplona? Negative, they replied. They have no radar contact. Now, Commander Martin Cito, the pilot of the second DC-9, asked Madrid for permission to give the object a complete turn. The permission was granted. Shortly after, a third plane, this time passing over Pamplona, heading to France, notified Madrid of the mysterious object. This encouraged Carlos Bermudez in the first plane to call. Bermudez radioed control, quote, what Iberra has reported and what Aviaco Pamplona Barcelona has also said, I fully confirm. Then Commander Cito, in the other plane, inspected the object, flew around it, and reported it looked like a gaseous mass that wrapped something. Momentarily, Cito considered directing his jets to blow mass off the object to reveal what was hidden. He decided not to, though, because he thought the action might endanger the passengers and crew.
Yeah.
Another odd aspect was...
What a pity.
Exactly. Another odd aspect was the top of the mysterious mass had a strange shine that could not be explained. The impression of the entire crew was the exterior of the mass was camouflage to hide something. As they were flying away from the cloud, they could see 2 strange plumes issuing from the top of the mass. Anyway, I don't know. Any further comments?
Yeah. Well, I don't think any UFO. They say they didn't see any UFO. They saw a cloud that they suppose camouflaged something. Well, it was their supposition. There was no UFO to be seen, and it is ridiculous to think of a 3 kilometers big UFO stop there, waiting, doing nothing for a while, for hours, and then disappear. It's so ridiculous. I can understand this kind of aliens that that after crossing so many light years, arrive here and do nothing?
Well, I wanted to. We're coming to the end of the show, and I wanted to give you a chance to tell us what you're working on now, what projects you're working on that might be related, where people can contact you, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I have just finished 2 books about aliens in a different from a different point of view. In one of them is a big, exhaustive, detailed study of aliens and flying saucers or Ufos in comics, in Spanish comics, from the very beginning, from the very first apparition in the 19th century up to the year 200. 2000. At year 2000. It's a long book with very much illustrated, to illustrate, and the conclusion is that everything that has been described in the UFO scene since 1947 has appeared before in comic.
And what's the name of the book, and when will it be out?
Well, I hope to publish it in this year, before the end of the year. I don't know. I have to go to find a publisher, or maybe I will get it done through Lulu or Amazon, something like that.
Does it
and
have?
The name would be something like Alienígenas Carpetobetónicos Ilustrados, Spanish illustrated aliens.
And excellent.
And then,
it sounds interesting.
Sorry?
Yeah, and you said there was a second book?
Yes, the second book is about UFOs on stamps, about stamps about UFOs, etc. It collected a series of articles I have written for the Spanish skeptical magazine El Escéptico, but it includes a catalog of stamps about Star Wars stamps, Star Trek stamps, and many others.
Oh, interesting.
This one is going to be published half in Spanish, half in English.
Oh, interesting. And how can people
get? Sorry, it will the same. I have to find a publisher, and it will. The provisional title would be "An Alien in My Box."
And how would people contact you?
Well, the easiest way would be to look at my Facebook blog, on my Facebook wall, under the name Reinaldo Manso.
Can you spell that, please?
I will give you the data. And then,
okay. And then, well, let me ask you, though, about the first book, the one about the comics. Yes. Are there some Spanish comics specifically about UFOs?
Well, there are plenty of stories, but there in the 1954, more or less, there appears one small collection, or about 20 stories, called name it exactly that, Platillos Volantes, Flying Saucers. It was fiction, of course, about the brothers from March, etc. But this was funny. It's funny. Yeah.
And does Spain have an equivalent to a Spanish equivalent to Flash Gordon or Buck Rogers?
Well, there is a Spanish equivalent to an English character you may know that was Dan Dare.
Ah, Dan Dare.
Dan Dare, yes. This was a very famous in Spain because it has a program, a translation, of course, a program in the radio in the 50s. and so it was very very famous. It was even they got even a play in the theater, and it was even a short TV episodes.
And what is the title?
In Spanish, he was called. Let me have a look. Diego Valor. It was called Diego Valor.
I'll have to investigate that. Well, we've come to the end of the show, Luis,
Okay.
and it's amazing how the time has gone by so fast. I want to
Yes.
thank you so much for agreeing to this interview, sharing all this fantastic information. I'm really
Okay.
happy that we were able to make this possible. And I would like to keep in touch with you in the future
Yes,
and
of course.
get more
no problem.
information and updates. Okay, well, I'm going to say thank you for now. I'm going to say good night. Thank you, Luis.
Okay.
And
Bye.
thank you, listeners. And good night.